One of the most frequent questions I encounter right now is, will I lose my job to AI? So I'm going to answer that question and give some perspective. But before I do, if you like the answer to this question or you find any of my content helpful, I would encourage you to subscribe as I continue living life at the intersection of business, technology, and the human experience. And if you have a question, send it my way and I will do my best to give some perspective on this. So, regarding the question of will I lose my job to AI, my answer to that would be it really depends on two things. And the first thing it depends on is, what do you mean when you're asking that question in terms of losing your job to AI? It sounds straightforward, but there's some more complexity to it than that. And I think the other part is, what is your attitude and the actions you're going to take in response to the answer that you get from that? And so it's really important to evaluate those kinds of things. So let me address this head on first with sometimes what I think the initial question is coming from is an AI algorithm or a suite of algorithms or some sort of app going to directly replace you at your company? Is your company going to buy a tool that they say, now we no longer need X person because we now have this app? Honestly, I'm not going to say it's never going to happen, but I think that specific scenario is going to only happen in very rare instances. I'm not going to say it won't, it might, but that will certainly not be the norm. And that's what I'm seeing as I'm working with companies who are working at evaluating AI as it relates to work. If it does happen, though, honestly, if you find yourself in a position where you get ousted for an app, it's honestly probably a good thing for you because that's not a company you probably are going to want to be at for the longer term. The reality is, taking a job run by a human and all of the complexity, because realistically, people do a lot of different things and there's a lot of different nuance. And so to just take somebody and go, you know what, we got an app that can do that, shows that the organization or the leader does not really fully understand that job, and replacing it with an app or an algorithm or whatever, it's straight up foolish. It's foolish to do it. So will there be some companies over the next few years who are going to make that mistake? That's not just a choice. They're going to make that mistake. Yes, I have no doubt there will be examples of this, but some of the narratives you see out there, some of the doomsday propaganda type stuff, that this is what we need to be concerned about, I think is going to be a lot less prevalent than you may see. It's going to be the exception to the norm. And even in instances where people make that mistake, what you will find, I think, what I predict will be very similar to other times where you see people make irrational, reckless decisions around removing positions and going, we don't need these people anymore, or we're going through a tough time, let's just cut this out. What will happen is they will ultimately reverse it, and whatever. It's an opportunity, honestly, if your company ends up doing this, it's an opportunity to go do something somewhere else and you'll be better for it. So let's talk about, that's again the exception. So I would say largely no, that AI is going to replace your job in that sense. But, and this is a big one, it doesn't mean that you can just sit on your laurels and your job is safe. This is not something, and this is a risk that I would put out there to everyone. There is a risk to the future of your livelihood in your job, and that is very, very real. No job is immune to what's happening with automation, with AI, and things like that. Now, you may say, wait a minute, you just said AI is not going to come take my job, yet in the same sentence, you're saying, well, but actually everyone's job is at risk right now and my livelihood's at risk. So are those contradictory statements? And to that, I would say, no, it's really more of a paradox that it happens to work out that way. So yes, in rare instances, maybe someone will make a foolish decision and try and replace people by apps. They'll realize their mistake and they'll probably have to go back and try and fix it and deal with all the consequences of that. These are the two that I think are more realistic risks that people need to be keenly aware of. And these are the ones that you need to be preparing for, because these are the situations that legitimately will put your job at risk. So the first one is, broadly speaking, there is a large amount of work activity that can and will be replaced by artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is actually superior to people in a lot of activity that is still being done by people today. And as companies start identifying those things and seeing what those things are, they will quickly start augmenting that. And the risk to you as an employee or to your team as a leader is if you don't stay in front of that, then you're putting yourself at a disadvantage because as they go, well, AI can do this. If you're not in a position to articulate how that changes things and how you still can justify the existence of the positions, and here's what you're going to do by doing that, and you're not in front, then the risk could be people could go, well, if you don't understand how to deal with this situation, maybe you aren't the right person for this job. And that is a real risk. And I've seen this happen not just around AI, this has happened in business transformation efforts where the company strategy changes and certain organizations or certain people go, well, this is how we operate. And new leadership looks at it and goes, but that's not how we operate as a company anymore. And you find people stuck in the, but that's how I operate. And very quickly, their performance numbers start to go down. The culture just starts working against them. And before you know it, your job is at risk. You're either out of the organization or you're just miserable there and hanging on, hoping to make it through the next round of layoffs. So, that to me, I think is probably one of the biggest ones that you can anticipate happening whether you do anything or not. That's going to be going on in organizations. It's happening now. I'm working with a lot of organizations and talking to a lot of companies about this very thing. How do they do that well? Because they have to start deconstructing work and looking at, well, what components make sense for AI? What components don't make sense for AI? And how do we restructure work to do that? If you're just sitting by waiting for them to make that decision, you are at risk, legitimately at risk. It's something that you have control over. Risk two, though, is just looking at the competitive marketplace, which is people who do the job you do today with AI are the greatest threat to that next opportunity you're looking at. Someone who is an identical copy of you, but has learned how to use AI to be faster, more efficient, more effective, they're going to beat you out. They're going to beat you in the job interview. They're going to beat you in the first 90 days. They're going to beat you in these other things. And that is a real risk. Now, this is something that you may be competing for jobs. And again, I said this on an interview last week. You don't necessarily need to be worried about AI quite as much as you need to be worried about other people who are learning and using AI. Those are going to be the biggest threat to your livelihood and your job in the very immediate future, because somebody's going to figure out how to do your job much more fast, efficiently, and effectively using AI to support them. And that's when suddenly the value you may have brought suddenly starts to look like a lot less value as somebody else can deliver the same thing far more effectively. So, what do you do with all of that? Because here's the thing, this could sound very negative, but the reality is this can be a really good thing because done right, AI is going to give you the opportunity to focus on the more human stuff, the things that really are optimized for people to be doing. So here's some things, and then I'll close it out on what you can do today. One of the most valuable things that I would encourage any leader to do or any individual to do is actually deconstruct your work activity. I shared just a minute ago that organizations are doing their best to get started on this. You actually have a chance to leapfrog ahead of them and get started on that now and actually look at the work you do and say, okay, what parts of this really uniquely and objectively make sense for me as a human, as an individual with my critical thinking, my experience, my expertise, my decision making skills? What actually makes sense for me to do? And what things maybe I even like doing, but really, quite frankly, I maybe need to let go of those things? Or what things don't I like to do that, quite frankly, I could find a machine to do it, at least a good chunk of it, more effectively? Because if you do that, you get to put yourself in the driver's seat. And so as these conversations start to happen in your organization, which they will, it's not an if they happen, it's they will happen, it's when they happen. What you do then is you have an opportunity to be in the driver's seat and have a distinct point of view and have a voice on, here's how I think we can optimize this. And if we do automate some of these things through technology, these are the other things that I think we could be doing with the time that's given back to us with this. These are some of the opportunities that we currently aren't able to get to because our time is spent with all these other activities. If we can free these activities up with AI, we can actually do this. This now positions you as a much more strategic partner in this transformation of work, and you get to help call the shots on some of that. And so that's something that you can do proactively today with the job you're in right now, because inevitably every single job right now could be improved with artificial intelligence. That doesn't mean it can be replaced or that artificial intelligence by itself is better than the person in the job. But what it means is there are components of it that are better. Deconstructing the job and actually starting to look at that is a great way to do that. Now, that means, and this is the second part, if me saying that goes, I don't really know what AI could do or how to actually do that work. That is something that I would encourage everyone right now to spend time doing. Skill yourself up. That does not mean that you need to know how to write algorithms or work with some of these different things. What it means is you need to understand fundamentally what tools and capabilities are out there. You need to understand the work that you do and how it actually gets done and all of those things. And if you don't, now's the time to do that so that you can understand, hey, I know these tools might be able to do this. Is there a way we could get artificial intelligence to help with some of this? And if we do, then that would give me more time to focus on these kinds of things. That really turns into a career development where you have an opportunity to almost create your own next job. And this is an opportunity not everybody has in their careers, but everybody is going to be given that opportunity if they haven't already. The last thing that I would say is master the skills that are going to matter. After you deconstruct that work and you go, these are the critical human components that need to stay distinctly human, make sure you are the master of those skills. And I'm talking legit master those skills, not, it's good enough. Work on being the best that you can be in those areas, because that is what is going to separate you from your competition, because you're going to be able to show, hey, I am really good at this. I can figure out how to do the artificial intelligence component, but I am the best or one of the best at some of these things to give you that competitive edge. And I think you're just going to feel better as you go through this transition. So there is 12 minutes on whether or not AI is going to take your job from you. And hopefully you find that helpful. Like I said, let me know what other questions, and I will continue with this shorter form format alongside some of my longer form stuff along the way. Have a great rest of your week.